Finding these coins, these emblems the other day, reminded me that day that we were phoned up by Reykjavik Energy to get there, to get to Reykjavik as fast as possible, because we were going to be the first photographers to ever photograph and see the water people. I remember getting in touch with you and telling you to get all the gear together.
Drop everything.
Drop everything. Get the Hasselblads together, get the Ellencrom together, get the Quantum together, and get all the gear together because we're leaving. And now I remember all the energy that we had, and we just forgot about the most obvious thing, that we might not come back. It occurred to me, I don't know when it occurred to you first, that we may never return.
It was the overwhelming excitement of the unknown, for me anyhow. The anticipation was tremendous.
And I remember us getting in the Hackney carriage. You putting the gear in the back, with my knees and my back, you doing all that. And then us setting off across London.
Along the river.
I remember the sound of the horse's feet on the ground. And it was the last thing I remember until we got to Reykjavik. I don't remember anything else. I remember going to that headquarters of Reykjavik Energy and those two men outside that were like getting these identity tags and almost like gunslingers with them. And I remember saying, that is the elastification of identity. Yes. And we went upstairs, remember? We went upstairs and we opened the door on the top floor of the building. And there in front of us was these air crew, or space crew. I remember a very upright captain, the shaven-headed pilots with water constantly dripping down their faces. And then there was a air hostess that had these rivulets of water pouring down in front of her. But I remember the captain coming in and interjecting and say, look, we are leaving at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Be at the launch pad. And don't forget, stick together and follow the pipes. We must follow the pipes, but essentially stick together. And he kept on repeating himself. The next morning, you remember that priest?
The blessing.
The blessing. And you remember looking at him and he had water pouring between his fingers as we got onto the spacecraft. And he was like blessing us, and it made me feel again that we might never, ever come back. We may never come back. Why did they have a priest there blessing our journey? And I remember us taking off, and everything became a bit of a blur. Can you remember what was outside the windows or anything? I can't.
There was those wonderful clouds. There was very, very sort of, we weren't sure where we were going.
Was it a bit like under the earth or above the earth or below the earth? It was extraordinary to realise where you were. And I remember when we landed and we got out of the spacecraft and it was like a moonscape. Do you remember it?
Little pebbles. Never put my foot on a surface like that.
And around us was like these misty lakes, really. There were like all this steam coming from these lakes that surrounded the craft. And then we walked across the landscape. I remember us going through loads of steam, over rocks, following the pipes continuously. And then we came to something. There were like 3 crucifixes, remember?
Yes.
And then I remember the captain saying, they are the others. I couldn't quite understand what he meant. And there was a giant waterfall right next to them. And we traversed on further until we reached these strange buildings. One was a cylinder, like a cylinder. The other one was like a flying saucer. You seemed quite excited, actually. You entered in first. I can just see you going in. And then you came rushing back to me, and you'd seen something. What had you seen in there? Just repeat to me, Gal.
It was the bleakness of a table with a window. There were windows, and looking out of each window, a rock face. But you were set within the rock face, and on the table there was the bowl.
The bowl?
The bowl. Do you remember what was in the bowl?
No, I can't. What was in the bowl?
3 beautiful apples. Apples from our childhood. Apples that meant something, that connected us.
But then when we left there, and we came across that misty city, remember, it was just lying in the mist. And I don't know whether it was the air stewardess or it was the captain, but they said, that is the city of the water people. And I remember when we went to the city, this great healer came towards us. And I looked into his face and I couldn't quite see his eyes. There was complete darkness in the sockets with just small apertures coming through the darkness. And then we were surrounded and welcomed by many more of them. Such beautiful people. These people were in charge of the water for the world. The water for the world. It's like a mist to me now. It's almost like as if it was a trance, really. I can't remember in absolute detail. I remember saying goodbye to them. And I remember trekking back. And I remember coming to this lake. And I remember getting in the aircraft. And I remember taking off and flying away. And I remember thinking to myself about the American Red Indians, about the fact that American Red Indians believe that UFOs are inside lenticular clouds. And I remember sitting in the spacecraft and dreaming of these lenticular clouds that I was immersed within as I flew over the top of the mountains. And when we came back...
Oh, what a reception.
What a reception. I remember we brought back with us a big bore, big steel bore to drill. And we brought back with us some working men's gloves.
Working men's gloves and a lunch bag.
A lunch bag.
They'd given us one day.
And then a small example of stone chippings from under the earth, where they'd been boring for the water.
And you had so beautifully photographed it next to a salt pot.
A salt pot. And then I remember we had to place for his protection what the water people called the pearl. You remember it like this building or something inside this glass case. And because when we were giving the lectures on our lecture tour, we just wheeled this strange object in.
And the response from the people were so inquisitive. The response that you had when you returned.
And we took with us the pilots. And the pilots received these beautiful, beautiful emblems. They knew what we were going to go through, I think. I think they did. So they were presented, remember, with these extraordinary medals.
That is wonderful.
And the water people, if you remember, as we left, presented me with this beautiful coin. But how did they know I was going to look like that? But They presented me with this extraordinary coin in memory. It's the most extraordinary experience.
And the press coverage
was immense.
From both the British, the Americans, the Irish.
Will we ever experience anything like that again?
No.
No. We never will